All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fatima. I'm co-founder of Collective 365 and want to welcome you to another Lunch and Learn. We have the pleasure of hearing from Bithiah Carter, who is the executive director and visionary of New England Blacks and Philanthropy. And without further ado, I'm going to just kind of jump in and ask a few questions. And then if we have some time at the end, open it up for participants to ask questions. So welcome, Bithiah. How are you today?
Well. Thank you. Thank you for having me today.
I'm excited to talk. I love talking to you in general. But can
Vice
you
versa.
start off by letting folks know, like, what made you start New England Black and Philanthropy, and then to take it to what you're doing across the country, which I think is phenomenal work. If you could kind of give folks a backstory a bit.
Sure, I'd love to. There are so many great things about our community. Then I love being Black. I love being Black. I love the strength of my melanin. I love the strength of my people. Sometimes I'm just moved to tears of what we've come through and what we've become. And I think too often the narrative is controlled outside of our world. It's controlled by other people. And my theory is those that control the image control the mind. And one of the questions I often ask people, we put a lot of time into thinking about prison reform and what's going on with prisons. And we have put a lot of money and allowed a lot of people to really focus in that area. We even have a book called The New Jim Crow, which is really on the prison system. Yet and still, when we think about us, right, and that is the image of us, right, and when we think about us being Black people, we're 13% of this population of 350 million people. It means we're 45 million people. My question is to you, you probably even know this answer. How many Black people are in jail? Do you know?
I don't know the exact number, but I believe isn't like 80% or like 70% of the jail population Black.
Of the jail population is Black, but what the question is, how many Black people are in jail? So we are 45 million people. What percentage of us are in jail of our population?
I would say maybe 40%.
I know we have to think about it, right? Because we're fed this narrative about us and who we are. And yet we're like, I don't know what that real number is, right? 1%, 450,000 of us are in prison. That's it.
Yeah. In
1%.
my mind, I'm like,
But that's the
more than
narrative
that.
that's shared about us, right? That we're violent, we're crabs in a barrel, we have no money, we have no assets, and we know in our heart. That's why you started Collective 365. That's not true. And how do we? And so my question was, how do we stymie that narrative? Because the real Jim Crow is really education. And think if we spent all the money in that space. Education affects everyone and touches everyone. But yet and still, we've been allowed to say the real Jim Crow. And that's not to say, and I have cousins that have been in prison, that 1% doesn't matter, but we could cut that 1% off to 0.01% if we really got focused on our community and our needs and our assets. Our assets are our future. Our assets is our mind, our ability, our entertainment, our ability to take things and mold them into other things, our creativity, and our philanthropy. And so when I was working in the philanthropic sector, I realized that whenever we talked about donors, we never mentioned Black people. Whenever we talked about philanthropy, we only talked about Black people as what we received, not what we were giving. We only talked about Black people as in, oh my goodness, they are victims of A, B, and C, without looking at what was underneath that, as if we never own assets, as if we never own banks, as if we never try to uplift ourselves. We have bought, somehow, some of us have bought into this narrative of lack. And I thought there must be a way to counteract that. And there's no better way of looking at what we have done, what we have come through, what we have overcome, and what got in our way, and then how we're even overcoming that. So when I sat in this space of giving out money, and I used to give money to predominantly women and girls program, I went to visit a young women's group, and there were Black young women. And they said, "Oh, if your a donor's coming to visit us, a philanthropist." And I walked in and I'm talking to the young ladies, and they were Black. And and I was there a little bit early. And finally, the program manager said, "Oh, Ms. Carter is here. Great." And she's going to talk to us about giving and philanthropy and why does she give. And the young women looked at her and said, "I thought she was going to be white." And I said, "No, I'm Black. And I'm proud to be Black." And we talked about that. And I realized we owe it to our children, our community, ourselves to talk about the assets in our community, talk about like collective 365, to bring us together to think through how do we not only overcome, but how are we using our assets to really be the velocity for the future?
Awesome. Like that really hit home as far as like why these conversations are needed. And it's about changing that narrative and making sure that we're in charge of telling our own stories. So when you are going around the country, so we have Give Black Richmond. I know you're working right now on Give Black Boston. You're also doing like the 757 Hampton Roads area.
Mhm.
Um, what are some trends that you're seeing? And you can speak to one specific area or overall. Would love to know trends, like strengths of of communities, and also kind of where do you see us going? Like or maybe some gaps that you think we could be addressing.
Mhm. Um, those are amazing questions. You know, when we started this work, we wanted to understand, where do Black people give? Where are we giving? How do we give? What do we need to know? Who's giving? Because there's this narrative that we don't give, or we give to church. One of the things I think that people are buying into, and even though and I speak to ministers about this as well, there's a sense that we're giving to church, and church is like, "Well, we're not receiving it, so I don't quite know where this is going." And I think that it's almost like, well, yeah, I think that's where Fatima's giving. I think so, but it's not like necessarily where I'm giving as Bithiah. The other thing we realized that there was a sense that Black people were more wish to be anonymous. Like, I don't want to know. I don't want to brag. I don't want to show that, you know, I don't want to put it out there. And what we would like to challenge people to do is put it out there. Everyone knows of the large giver, or whenever we think of philanthropists, there's a reason that we think of philanthropists being white, because they put their names out there. They put the language out there. They curate that language of philanthropy. Even time, talent, treasure, ties, or testimony. When we see a group of volunteers, they tend to be white, even young white people. We need to put ourselves in that space so that our children will see us in that space, so that we can see each other in that space and create this community, this beloved community we want to see. The other trend I will say that we have seen that we want to help people through, how do we bridge the generational gap? So you tend to see older people giving with their group, and then we see like younger people trying to give or get with their group. You have Generation X is somewhere in the middle. But how do we bridge these gaps that we're looking at issues in a collective manner? One of those issues I'll give you, for example, is even parenting. You know, we have an older generation that thinks things have to be really traditional. We have another generation that's saying, hey, you know, if I'm a woman and I make 250 a year, do I really need to get married? Why can't I just have my child? Yet, you know, we are putting emphasis on things that don't really matter rather than the emphasis of the future. So how do we use this as a way of strengthening donor networks, strengthening connections? And that's the part that I really will take away from most of this. How do we increase our ability to talk to each other about the future we want to see, rather than what we're seeing presently, and really think through intergenerational and coming about it from different socioeconomic points of view of where do we want to see ourselves in the future. I think we spend too much time talking about the past and talking about, excuse me, where things were rather than where they're going. And then my last piece is, how do we get good information about our communities? For example, even the conversation that we just had about the prison system. Who's curating that knowledge? How do we ensure that we got Black researchers telling us about the truth about our Black community and pushing that narrative forward that no one can lie about us ever again? I think we're going to see a lot of those challenges coming up as we start to think about critical race theory and how that's going to be taught in schools. What's the role of Black philanthropy in ensuring that we talk about civics, our history properly, and not just leaving that up to other people to determine? Because I can tell you, you're not going to talk about the Holocaust or the Irish famine in some kind of way without their philanthropic dollars saying, no, this is the truth, and this is the way that you're going to tell our truths. So I think as I'm doing this work across the country, I'm hoping that it gives us the opportunity to connect more and build better networks across our entire beautiful Black community.
Yes, to all of that goodness. What keeps playing in my head is who's who's telling the stories, and it really makes me think about when I first got pregnant with the idea of Collective 365, of like wanting Black and brown people to be the decision makers and the thought leaders instead of being so focused on like quantitative data, and that's what traditional funders are looking for. And sometimes uh, the testimonies of how racism, white supremacy impact you
Mhm.
can't be quantified, right? Like
Mhm.
that is my truth, and so
But
making
Fatima, you know what's interesting about what you just said? That's where philanthropy comes in, right? Because philanthropy changed when white donors said, why don't we do rapid response? Maybe I don't need all of that information. Donors said that, and all of a sudden we're talking about that. And so, Fatima, I think what you're doing, what the collective is saying, how do we rethink this? And then using your collective power to push that forward.
yeah. So my other question is, what do you see as challenges in the philanthropy space? Like, you've touched on it a little bit, but are there any other things that you want to add as far as like what you think we could be doing better or differently?
Right. Um, I want to say it is to increase, promote, and involve all Black donors, and being intentional about that. And how do we increase? We had recommendations for Richmond that I will share them with you, but um, increasing this visibility and increasing cross-sector collaborative. I don't know if I have the ability to share, but I will share with you the
Can
recommendations,
you see the screen? Can you share your screen?
yep, that came out of our work for Richmond. And I think this is really key for us to think through. And that's why I felt it was important for us to share. How do we, so with we had 8 recommendations for Richmond in particular. And I don't know if most of your audience are, most of the collective are from Richmond, but I thought this might be helpful. How do we raise the visibility and participation and build upon this momentum? And I'm hoping that each and every one of you will have the opportunity to read the report, and I'll send the link to the report, to strengthen not just some networks, but all of Black donor networks, including the ones that you may know or not know about or not. How do we engage and support each other and leadership of younger Black philanthropists? We felt that was really key. Philanthropy can't be this late in life deal. This has to be something that we're doing now. We actually asked the Community Foundation to offer more tools and resources to increase knowledge around philanthropic wealth, create this and then use that as an opportunity to create cross-sector networks and thought leaders, and even nonprofits, because when you work at a nonprofit or when you are deep in the work, there are just things that you see from your day-to-day business and the day-to-day work that you're doing in the community that may not be readily available to anyone. But excuse me, it is very important if we're going to have a future of Black philanthropy to increase, promote, and involve all of our donors. And I cannot say that part enough. That is vitally important. This is not about, as my father would say, and I remember when he used to say it, I didn't quite understand it, like the big I's and little U's, and I am this, but you can wait your turn. No, we got to stop that and amplify our Black-led organizations to assist them in building better bridges. And how do we set the narrative straight? It is so important for us to set the narrative straight because even we believe in that narrative of lack, that narrative of deficits about our communities. And one of the questions I love to ask people, what percentage of Black people do you think are impoverished? Because we hear that all the time. We're poor, we're poor, we're poor, we're poor, we're poor. And just think about your community, your cousins, your family. What percentage of your family are not really doing well? And it's not poor. Maybe they're economically deprived, right? Because they're not poor in spirit. If you look at the number nationally, it's less than 20%. It's 18.8%. That means 80% of us are not impoverished.
Yeah, I was gonna say more than that, honestly. And
80,
I think it's like your perception is your reality, right?
right, right. And so how do we change that reality? Because what if all of our children knew 80% of us are doing well? Guess what? You have a 95% chance of doing well. Let's get with the program. That's a whole different message to tell our children. I feel like even all the HBCUs should say, come to the school because you know what? You have a 95% chance of doing well in life by coming to the school. That's a whole different message rather than saying, listen, little poor Black girl, I know you're going to have a hard life and you ain't going to do well, but I'm going to try to help you out a little bit. That's a whole different message of lack that you put into me as a Black girl, where you could tell me, I know you might hit a rope, but let me tell you something, 95% of us do well. And that is the message that I think white people hear over and over and over again about themselves, and they believe it. Even when they trip down and fall, they believe it. And it's not even their fault that they trip down and fall. It's our fault because they're doing well. And if it weren't for you, I would be doing better. Mm-mm. We got to shift up that narrative. And I think we can only do it when we're all working together, all of our generations working together to foster this greater good for all of us.
I am wanting to be mindful of the time. I know you have to leave in like 9 minutes. So I want to open it up to those that are present if they had any questions or comments that they wanted to share with Bithiah. Feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself. I'm guessing there are no questions. Bithiah, is there any other gems you would like to drop today as it relates to the work that you're doing? Also, if there are ways that folks can support your work, because as you know, Collective 365 is focused on DC, Maryland, and Virginia.
Mm-hmm. We would love to be invited to your local community. As you think about DC or as you think about Maryland, to better understand Black giving there. We would love to figure out how do we partner and support with you as well. We are, one of the things that we're creating is a Give Black Alliance. And our goal is to share our resources. We're starting a small fund, and what we want to figure out, how do we strengthen these Give Black networks. How do we strengthen you through bringing information about how to run a nonprofit? What is gap accounting? What does that look like? What is the operations functions that I can't live without? And I feel like for our white counterparts, it's not like they get information through osmosis. They are creating small groups to talk about how to run a great organization, how to get mentored. And we want to start creating those spaces for us as well. It's not good, it's not just enough to say, hey, great, I got $1,000 on Giving Tuesday. Okay. We need to say, how do you get $1,000 daily throughout the year to sustain the organizations? And we want to do a better job of connecting Black donors or BIPOC donors with BIPOC organizations. And that's what our Give Black Alliance is going to really get focused on. So as you think about philanthropy in your local community, or as you're thinking through um, even organizations, we'll send out a list to you that we really want to start listing these BIPOC communities and creating a space that we can have collective learning. I am particularly interested in Collective 365's growth because we can't be if you're not here. And we want to make sure that we are sharing what we're learning. If we go to Northern Virginia, that we share that report with you. As you know, we're in Hampton Roads. We'll be sharing that with you. Feel free to post our work. Feel free to come to our programs. We actually have a program coming up that I have to admit, I don't. I don't even know how God put this in our spirit. So October, we thought we're going to have a program on police, defund the police 365 days later, 1 year later. So it's slated for April 29th, right? Who knew that April would be like this, right? We had the shooting. We have the trial. People's emotions are raw,
And
but
the incident with the pepper spray
oh my God,
in
I
Windsor,
just saw
Virginia.
that. I, this man is serving in armed forces
Yeah.
and he's being dragged out of his car for no apparent reason. So we would like to share our events with you, and please invite others. And then, as you have your events, please share them with us. But what we want to do with these events is figure out, how do we share this information and then help to have local conversations on what should we do and where should we go. We are excited to have Sean Ellis from Trial 4. I don't know if you saw Trial 4 on Netflix. He's going to be there. We're going to show a clip from that. We have another gentleman, I don't know, Lieutenant Edwin, I can't think of his name. He came from Crime Plus Punishment from New York. He's going to be on our couch as well. We would love to invite you to our couch conversations or be a part of our couch conversation as we explore these larger issues and really try to think through, what does it mean in our local community?
Yeah. Are those events currently on your website?
Yes, they are, and they're free.
Okay.
So you can
I
share
will
them with
make
anyone.
sure to add them to our event page so that people will be redirected to your page. And I will be posting this video on our YouTube channel, and I'll put a link to the report in the description.
Oh, that's fantastic. And we want to be a great partner. We don't know it. We don't know everything. We're learning just like everyone else. So as you are thinking about your growth, please just be clear with us how we can be helpful. And please, you don't have to be that clear. Just call us. Because as we're thinking about our growth, we're going to just call you. And we may not be that clear, but we'll figure it out together.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciated building this relationship with you, and I am glad to be able to share your wisdom with a broader group of individuals. And we will definitely be in touch. Like I said, we will post this on our YouTube channel and let everyone know in our newsletter that they can go back and watch this. But I want to say again, thank you, Bithiah, not only for being here today, but your commitment to the Black community and philanthropy as a whole, and shifting that narrative and making sure that we are in control. So thank you for that space. And thank you for those that were able to attend today. And for those who are watching, thank you, thank you. Protect your peace, protect your joy. And if you're interested in joining Collective 365, visit our website, collective365.org. You can also follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Collective 365 Info. Shoot us an email. A real person, that is I, will respond to your email. So collective365info@gmail.com. Thanks and have a great weekend.